Hi there, my name is Astrid Sapphire, and I'm excited to be sharing with you my first Byte-Sized ServiceNow series. To start off with, I'm going to run through a process at a high level, which makes up our Byte video. I'll then go and break down each step of that process, making up bits in separate videos. As you may know, there are 8 bits to a byte. However, as I may do more or less than 8 videos, I'm going to take a little bit of creative license with that. Now, this first installment is focused on backing up and retrieving work from source control with a particular focus on personal developer instances. That said, these principles can be applied to any source control capable instance. Bit 0. Setting up your source control. To start, we're going to need to set up a source control environment to use. Now, ServiceNow supports Git version control, which means we can work with any Git capable tools. That means we've got both locally hosted and cloud hosted options to choose from. Now, 2 of the major platforms that provide free tiers for this on the cloud are GitHub and GitLab, and for convenience, I'm going to proceed here with GitHub as I've already got an account there. Once you've signed up for GitHub, you'll need 2 key components. You're going to need a repository to commit your work to, and a personal access token, which acts like a password to prove your identity to GitHub when you're committing your work. So to create a repository or repo in GitHub parlance, click the plus here in the top right and choose New Repository. From here, you're going to want to make sure that you've selected your profile as the owner. I've got a couple here to choose from, and that you've set a name that's memorable for you. For now, we're going to call this Byte-Sized ServiceNow example 1. Perfect. Now, we've got a couple of options here. We can choose our privacy settings as well. If I didn't want anybody else to be able to see my work, that would be an option for me there. But apart from that, you can leave the rest of these defaults as they are and go forward here. So create repository, hitting this big green button. Now, you're either going to want to keep this tab open or copy this value here, the HTTPS URL with .git here, because we're going to use this in a later step. I'm just going to copy that off to a notepad on the side. Alrighty. Now, the next step that we're going to need to go through is setting up an access token. Now, to set up an access token, you're going to want to navigate to the settings page here. I'll go from my profile tab, so we've got that separate tab, settings. And then we're going to see a sidebar on this left side. We're going to go all the way down to the bottom of that sidebar where we can see developer settings. We're going to click on that one there, and that'll take us to another page with another sidebar. Again, now we just want to go personal access tokens. And then in this case, we're going to click on fine-grained tokens. These are sort of the newer way to do this, and what I'd prefer to show you this time sets us up for the future. So what we'll do is we'll hit generate new token. Now we've got a few different options. Your key focus is here. You're going to want to name the token in a way that makes sense. Say, I want this to be for PDI example backup. That will help me know that when I see, say, a notification that it's going to expire, that I know what that's going to impact if I don't go and treat that problem. I can also change my expiration time. I'm going to leave that as is, but you've got options there as well. And then I'm going to make sure I'm the resource owner. Now, repository access. You're going to want to choose from either all repositories or only select repositories. I personally recommend going to only select repositories. It allows you to just choose quite specifically what repos you want to give access to. But you can also certainly choose all, which would give it access to any repositories. It means you don't have to come in and change this if you're adding future repositories. For now, I'm going to go into only select repositories, and I'm going to choose the one we just created, BSS example 1. And now I'm going to go into permissions. Now with permissions, we only need one permission that we're going to set, and that's going to give us a second permission that's required in order for that to work. So here we're going to go in and choose read and write for content. That just lets us actually work with the repository to put that code in. Without that, we're going to have a very rough time. So that one's set there, and we can now see that metadata has been set to read only. It just lets us capture some of that key metadata, allowing us to commit. Going down here, we just want to go look at our overview now, make sure that we've set it up the way we want it to, and capture that expiry date as well. So we know that on March 3rd, if we haven't fixed it, we might have an incident on March 4th. Not really. Gonna hit the big green button again, generating our token. Now you only see this token once. You can go in and regenerate it, but at this point in time, you're going to want to copy that token and then store it somewhere safe. Bit 1, creating your app. Now that we've got a GitHub repository, let's go put some work in there. Now, let's imagine that we've got a problem statement to work with, just so we've got a little bit of a flow I can follow. Our problem statement is that I started doing development in the global scope and I want to back all of that up. First thing, that's totally okay. It's very easy to do. It's always great to get into a habit of working in application scopes if you can, but sometimes you're also going to be constrained and have to work in the global scope. That's all right. I'm going to go through how we address this problem in this case, but in the accompanying bit video I'll go in depth on how to do this with application scopes and application customizations, including cases where you started out working with update sets as well. Now, to begin, let's create a global app. That's often referred to as an application bundle to distinguish it from the two I just mentioned. I'll also pop a link in the description of this video just to point to a video where some awesome individuals from ServiceNow explain those different types far better than I can. Now let's start by opening Studio here. We're going to need to open Studio at this point in time. I'm working on a Vancouver instance, but this is the same in Utah, Tokyo, and Washington, and any instance back at least as far as Quebec. I know it goes a lot further back in source control, but Quebec is where sort of the behavior changed a little bit. Alrighty, so firstly I'm going to go here and create an application. Now, as we go through this approach, I'm doing this outside of App Engine Studio, not because you can't do this in App Engine Studio, but I just wanted to show this example using the tool that everybody's got available to them. So you can go into this page that you will have got when you hit Create Application, and it'll say Scoped or Global. Now we want a global one. We don't want it to be in a scope, which means we won't have its own scope name. When you look at the application field, it will show this application, but the underlying application scope is still going to be global. Alrighty, now we're just going to enter a name. This is going to be BSS example 1, because that's what we named our repository. These don't have to be the same name at all. Something to keep in mind is you want to try and avoid special characters, particularly on the GitHub side, just because you want to avoid any URL passing weirdness. But apart from that, you can set whatever you need here. Alrighty. We're now going to go here and click Create. Now, that's all I need to do. I don't want to go through and do the rest of this Studio application building process. I could, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in this case, we're just going to continue in Studio. Now, we'll get the option to choose our application here. And we want to go and find BSS example 1. Bit 2, connecting your app. Alrighty, so we're in our application now. Now looking from the Studio view, we want to check a couple of quick things. We can see the application details here over on our left side. And on the right side, we can see a little disconnected plug. Now, that disconnected environment over here, that's indicating that we're not connected to source control. Very handy to keep an eye on, because it will also change depending on if we've made customizations on our side, or if there is something that it can see from the repository itself. So what we want to do is link to source control, but before we do that, we need to make sure we've got our credential created. Now just going back to our start page here, the one thing that we're going to want to change is we're going to want to move out of our application scope in order to create the credential. Don't technically need to do this. It just always makes me feel a little bit more comfortable when I step out of that environment so that I know that I'm working completely distinctly. You don't want to be capturing credentials in source control ever. So it's just one of those things to consider. So we're going to go find credentials here under connection and credentials. Here we go. Now we want to go and create a new basic authentication credential. So we hit new and we go through to basic. Now under name here, we can set a descriptive name because this is the field we're going to be seeing when we choose. So for example, this might be BSS bit 2, just to align with our video theme here. Now we don't want to change the order. We want to set in our username from GitHub. Then we want to grab that token that we created earlier. Alrighty. You might also have saved it in a separate page. Going through, we're going to hit password into there and then hit submit. Alrighty, good to go from that one. Now let's change back into our application. I'm going to go over here to do that and we're going to link it now. So link to source control. We're going to need that URL that we also saved earlier. Just grabbing it here. I'm going to bring that and put it in here. We want to choose our credential, BSS bit 2. Now for the branch name. Now branch naming is a whole thing. I personally don't like or use ServiceNow's default naming convention too much. Completely understand where it's coming from. I'm just from an environment where I am not used to having as many instances as are necessary for each developer to have their own. So by habit, what I'll do is I will have a main branch, which is sort of my production ready version of my application. And then I'm going to have separate dev or non-production versions. Because we're doing an initial connection and there's nothing in there now, we're just going to set this to be the main environment. I don't need to set any of these other values, but I could if I wanted to have that information going through. And for commit comment here, I'm just going to say that I'm connecting my PDI. Now that we've got that, we can hit link to source control. And there we have it. That's gone and been connected and committed to source control. Now you can see a few things immediately on this page. The disconnected plug is now connected with the main message there. And we can also go over to our GitHub page and we refresh and we can see the commit just now with that detail in there. Awesome. If we jump into that real quick, we can see the detail of the application itself. This is our sysapp record. And then we can see our update folder. Now, there's a linked file in here, but I'll show you that more in the next step. Bit 3, adding work as well as data to your app. Now that we've connected to our source control, let's go through and move some work into our application. Now, a good habit that I always try to follow and I always want to try and instill is to move to a development branch. If you're really short on time, you don't have to do this. However, I would recommend creating a separate dev branch. It just allows you to have an environment that is separate to your main. So you've got a good state and then a working state. Now, obviously, in this example, we've got nothing in here yet, but it's just a good practice to get into. Creating that branch now. What this will do is it'll move us over. So take out any work that's in main and bring us over to dev. Now you can see that we're in dev in the bottom here, still connected, still all good. Now there are 3 different components here that I would like to bring into our application. I'm going to use a couple of different ways in order to do that. But we've got a notification, just using the SNDev's teal donut created by MGOPW there. And we've also got some incidents I'd like to back up, and then a flow designer flow as well. Alrighty, so firstly, let's start from Studio. Within Studio, you can go and add files to your application. So if I come here, Files, I would click Existing Files. If you're creating brand new, you can create new from here. You can create outside of here as long as you're in the scope that you're trying to work in. But going into add existing files, you've got a few different options you can choose from. You can go and choose a specific update set, which is handy if you've got one of those already. Or you can go look by the name of your item or the table that you've created as well. So in this case, I'm looking for my flow, so I want to look by its name. So if I go do the thing, wait a moment, I'll see my flow there. You can see that it's in the global application and it's customized. Now that customized one is a good thing to keep an eye on. So if you're working in the global scope and, for example, you want to move something that was created there, let's take the incident table. Something to keep in mind is that changing the application can impact what you're doing there. So, for example, here's one we can see that's not customized. This is a dictionary entry here, and it has a little warning symbol. If you touch this, you will now possibly be causing a skipped update. So only do that if you really intend to. Don't just pull these in willy-nilly. This isn't a way to put all of an application in a box. You really only want to put the relevant parts that you've touched in. Alrighty, so what we've got now, we've got that flow, it's in our application. Super handy, super quick and easy. Another way to do it, you can see, is through a record itself. You can go into the record there, you can go into its context menu, and you can see move to application here. If I click move to application, it'll give me a pop-up and a list that I can use as well. Now, to show this from the list view, if you had a list view with multiple items at the same time, you could go through and select and move to application. Same as we're doing here. So the application, we need to name it. We know the name of it already, so we're going and putting that in there. We're hitting move, and that's moved that file in. So what we'll do is we'll just quickly go back to Studio. We can see both our notification and our flow. Now, data records are a little bit different. Now, you might have created some demo data that you want to share with people, or you might have gone through and created a whole example for your workplace, for example. Totally fine. These things are very useful to do, and one of the great use cases of a PDI. In order to back up data, you still want to move it into the application, but because it's not metadata in the sense that business rules or other things are, you just need to go and select the records, generally from a list view. Now I might want this one, this one, this one, and this one. I go to Actions here, and we can see Create Application File, different from Move Application. Move to application, we want to create an application file here. It's telling me what I'm adding, where it's from, and the different choices I can make for when I want to load it. Now I've got new install and upgrades, so every single time, new install, so only the first time, and new install with demo data, only if I choose to install demo data with my application. For now, even if somebody deleted one of these or made any updates to it, I still want these to come back in exactly as they are. So I'm choosing new install and upgrades. Okay. Now those are all done as well. Perfect. And we can see one of those was already in, like I showed in the previous. So it's actually told me that I've just updated that as well. You can do this if you're iterating on records. It's a perfect way to go through. Now, if we come back over to Studio, we'll see something a little bit exciting, that local changes exist on this repository. You can also see that that little plug symbol indicates a link there. So now we're ready to go through and commit. Bit 4, committing and moving your work to main. Our next step will be committing the application. So within the window here, what we want to do is we want to go over to source control and go to commit changes. Now, just very briefly on these other two options here, apply remote changes will pull down the latest changes from the external environment, in this case GitHub, and stash local changes would allow you to grab certain items in your commit. Let's say you're not ready to commit this component yet. Grab them out and stash them, and then commit them so you can keep them locally without, apply the stash back so you can keep them locally without committing them. In this case, we just want to do a commit. Not afraid of commitment with this one. So now we've got our few different options in here, and we can see there's 3 metadata snapshots, I'm a PDI, and do the thing, those 2 other records we added. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit continue, and we're going to add a commit comment. So our commit comment is back up dev to GH. Now, you can also use some different prefixes to try and indicate what your sort of commit it is. Features, fixes, bugs, all of those different things there. It's obviously dealer's choice, and as you're just learning or working with it on your own, you can do whatever you'd like. I'm going to hit commit files here. Now, the more development in there, the more time it takes to serialize those really quickly and commit them through, but it gets there. Now we want to go over to our repo, and we can see that there was a recent push into the dev branch, which was the branch that we created there. So if I go to dev here, I can go in and look at that, but I can also do this compare and pull request. Because I'm going to want to pull this into main at some point, I'm going to go ahead and do this now. Going through here, we can see the commit that I'm looking at, which is the one that just happened, and that 6 files were changed. You can see this checksum here. Now don't worry about the checksum. It's from a previous way ServiceNow operated through this one. It doesn't cause any issues or any concern. We've dealt with it a lot during Hacktoberfest, for example. If you ever see an issue or a merge conflict related to it, just shout out and let me know. But you've also got these other components here. You've got the flow, which is a lot of lines. You don't want to read those ones, but you can also see those metadata records, as well as, finally, the email action in there as well, that notification. Now, it's looking all good. You don't often want to go down and look at the different diffs here, but that does give you the opportunity to do that. Just depends on what you need. And then I'm going to go in and I could add a description. In this case, I don't think that's necessary. I'm going to go through and create the pull request. A pull request is like knocking on the door of the main branch and saying, hey, can I bring this over to you? Now my choice as the maintainer here, it being myself, totally fine. I'm happy with that one. I'm happy with that code. It's not going to cause any major problems here. If I'd done many commits in there, I could maybe want to shorten those down and I could use some of these options here. But in this case, we're going to do a squash and merge. Just totally fine to do whichever one of these you want. Squash and merge, confirm squash and merge, and we're done. So what that means is from our instance side, our dev branch is up to date. But if I wanted to, I can now go switch my branch over to the main branch, and that will have that same detail in it. Let's do that now. There we go. And we can see, because that development was already in there, there was no changes or no files that needed to be added or removed. If you have added files to one of those branches that is not present in the other and you have committed it, ServiceNow will remove and add them so that it's keeping the appropriate state for your branch. Got to be careful with that, only because if you add anything that's out of the box, anything that you're expecting to be there that hasn't before been in the source control for that application, it just means that you're actually possibly going to remove it. I've seen it happen to virtual agent topics, so you just want to be prepared and make sure you're on top of that. Bit 5, removing the app. So this step isn't strictly necessary for our process. This is just going to go through and quickly show you how we remove the source control configuration and a app, in this case the app bundle. And you'd really only want to do this if you, say, pulled in the wrong application for some reason. In this case, I'm doing it just to simulate refreshing my PDI without refreshing my PDI. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the application. Now I've already started moving some of the metadata out of this one because it's a global app bundle. Deletion works just a little bit different. And so I'm just going to move this last one here. Same way I moved the others, which is to go through, move to application, and choose the application I want that to go to. In this case, I'm going to move that to global. And then we're going to hit delete. I'm going to say delete, and lastly, delete. And there we go. That one's now deleted. So that application is no longer available in our instance, which is perfect for this example here. However, if we did try to import that application again, we'd see some issues. And the reason for that is one of the tables in the background called the repository configuration. Sysrepo config for that one. That's where ServiceNow is storing the relationship, and there's a few different tables through here. But for convenience, let's say I wanted to go in here, we can see that link goes directly to there, and the record's got a little bit of information. However, I just want to remove this one so I can pull this application in again. I'm going to click on this here. Like once again, going to choose to delete. And it'll tell me that there's going to be some cascade deletions, which I'm prepared for and I accept. So I'm hitting delete. Awesome. Now that's removed that configuration there from my instance. Bit 6, importing an app. Now that we no longer have that application record, let's go through and bring it in. This is the same thing we do as if we were starting with a new PDI or moving to a different environment through a development chain. Alrighty, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with a fresh studio instance. The reason we're starting afresh is we just don't want to have that previous one that had the application. Just close that tab out. Now, instead of the previous time where we chose to create an application, we're just wanting to import now. Now, I'm just going to quickly go and grab that URL once more. A reminder that you can grab that by going to the code page and grabbing the HTTPS link there. Put that in. We want to use that credential we created earlier. Now we want to choose our branch because we've done that pull request, moving our work into that main branch. We want to pull from main in this case. I could also pull from dev. Now I'm going to import. Perfect. Now let's go in and look at that application. There we go. See the connected symbol there, linked to this one. And here we are. We've got our notification and our flow designer flow. If we go into that notification table, we'll see once the page reloads that we're back in that application. And similarly, we'll see that information over here in Flow Designer. If we also wanted to check for ourselves, we can go to our application scope record. And see all of that different information there. Bit 7, final thoughts. Thank you so much for watching this far. Source control is a really awesome, if somewhat underutilized way to work with ServiceNow configurations. It's really handy for backing up, and there's a lot of features I'd love to see, but there's a lot of features I already love with what it's got there. What I'd strongly recommend is treat this like any development environment. You want to be saving consistently and committing to cloud consistently. You might see in some memes that you've got a git commit before you get out of the building during a fire alarm. It's a very similar sort of thing. Make sure you've got that backed up and you'll be set up for success there. For example, with the current PDI issues, just make sure that you don't have to worry about that. You can put down that PDI and start with a new one the next day. I'd really love any sort of feedback, any thoughts on this one. The coming bits, I'm hoping to dive a little bit deeper into each of these components, talk through how you can pull an entire update set into source control so you can see the history from update sets as well. There's a lot of really cool stuff to see, and I'm really keen to show you that. But I'm really keen to understand how you found this video and how you found the information that I shared and if it was helpful at all. You can always reach me also on SN Devs in the SN Devs Slack, on the Mastodon, anywhere, as well as through sapphirenow.dev or the ServiceNow community. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and good luck with your source control journey.